poetry. Color me the man that quite I am, and that will be my eternal flame. Color me poetry, for nobody knows my name. I am the living experience, I am the lifelong proof. Color me the poetry of nothing but the truth. I am not to be sold or bought, so color me a scholar in the school of thought, for I am poetry. Color me the native sons that can't be set apart from the poetry of the soul that's straight from the heart. Color me poetry. Hi, I'm Danny Queen, and welcome to another exciting edition of Color Me Poetry. I'd like to welcome my most lovely guest, Miss Grace Cavaleri. Hi, Grace.
Danny, I heard that poem once many years ago on Wpfw.
I remember
the poet and the poem, and you were one of the strongest spirits in Washington, and you still are.
I certainly appreciate that. What have you been doing? I mean, it's great to have you here. I mean, you got a beautiful anthology here we're going to talk about. And
15 years on WPFW this year.
Oh, it's been that long?
We're starting our 16th year, and you were there at the beginning, so you do know. Every week without interruption, we've had poets, and it is beautiful. A very, very important energy flow through Washington, and it has reached out to the nation. So it's the only ongoing poetry program on radio, and you were a very vital part of that beginning, and we'll be back again to visit on and on. So this year, to celebrate our 50th anniversary, I sent out as many letters as I had addresses for, and went on the radio and asked as many people as could hear my voice to send in a poem if they had ever been on my program. And we have had 1,000 poets as of 1990, and I got 300 answers, and we have this wonderful poetry anthology of almost 400 pages, and it is a very strong book. I think it's a compendium of poets who have lived and written and worked in Washington, also those who have come to visit as teachers to teach and write. It has memorialized our great elders and ancestors, Sterling Brown.
Yes.
The teachers
Strong
of us.
men keep a coming.
Yes,
I love
yes, Olam. And Mae Miller, of course, our great, strong woman poet. She was born at the beginning of the century on the campus of Howard University. And she's still writing. She won't tell us how old she is, but if she was born at the beginning of the century, she has to be 92.
At least.
At least.
Yeah.
But she won't talk about that. And so the book is strong in that it memorializes as well as gives a showcase to poets who have never been published before. We have people, that's their first poem in there.
That's the beautiful thing about your show. It gives exposure to people not only known and unknown, but to people who just starting out.
But greatness doesn't have to be packaged.
That's true.
And we, if we aren't open to what's alive and vital, well, I think you and I both know we better just go home.
That's right.
Because it's always to keep the door open and to hear the new voice. And that's what keeps us ourselves going. You can't have more energy going out than is coming in. And we've got to keep that energy coming in and flowing as artists. You know that.
Yeah, it's like a revolving door. You have to keep it coming. I like to inspire young people to write. Because the beauty of writing and the beauty of the arts, we don't put enough time, energy, or money into the arts, because it's like it's separate from life. It's not separate from life. The arts is certainly a part of life. And it is life, really.
Danny, you've always been one of the people in this area who have championed the artist as a very important citizen. Not just the artist as other, as alien.
That's right.
But you have always said that the artist should be the mover and the shaker of the society. And you've always worked diligently to make that happen.
I really believe that's the truth.
And now you and I were talking about how do you do this? Where do you get the funding for it? How do you stay alive to do it? And I think you and I are both struggling with the survival.
Yeah.
But the artist has always been this way, Danny. It has no stall in the marketplace in America.
I once heard a writer say, you can really write, you write some great stuff when you're hungry. Well, I've been hungry.
That's
so I don't know
a good one. I like it. I like it. But you've still managed to feed other people.
Yes.
And that is the important thing.
I think artists, poets, we feed people in many different ways. you know. I mean, because you have to keep the energy flowing, and you have to love what you're doing. You have to do it for the love of it. And that's not to say that, you know, we don't need money and to do greater things and to bring other people in, to help other people. But, you know, I write for the love of doing it. And that's the beauty of it. And to share with other people. I think poets, you know, kind of take it to another level. Because poets sometimes see what other people don't see, or sometimes train not to see.
I like
that makes sense.
I like it. Makes a lot of sense. Yes, I think the poet notices everything in the world, and as Buddha says, may we be awake one moment before we die. Well, the poet wants to be awake as much as possible, to smell and to see and to feel deeply, and to tell how that feels to be alive. And by that, we know more about our human record. I think the only documents left from the Roman era are the poems. And that is the only historical way we know how people felt from that era. Think of that. That's the only thing. Their sensibilities have been left in their poetry. Now, we don't know historically what we were contributing, you and I, Danny. But history will tell us that this is the way it felt to be alive in 1980 or 1990. And that's the legacy.
That's funny you said that, because I was just thinking that sometimes people, there's genius among us, and not to say I'm some kind of genius, I'm just ordinary myself.
An ordinary genius.
But people sometimes we don't recognize it, and it's kind of like I once heard Richard Pryor say it in his hometown where he grew up. And people didn't think of him. I mean, we think of him, oh, he's a great comedian and all that. But people who were in his hometown, who knew him and knew his family and knew his grandmother who helped to raise him and that type of thing, they're like, well, ain't no big deal. I know him. He live around the corner. He used to do that stuff around the pool hall, you know. And they just take it for granted. But we think of him as being so great and all that. But people who knew his family and grew up with him, they're like, man, he's been doing that stuff for years, you know.
I think that's interesting, because when you become famous, it's like a runaway train. And then it takes on a whole different vibration. It's another reality. What you do is move into another bridge of consciousness. But what we do as teachers of poetry is to try to tell young people that poets, famous people, we're just like them.
Right.
They felt the same things. Just because they're dead and their names are in the library doesn't mean, even Shakespeare was just Shakespeare.
Human emotions don't change. I mean, those are the same kind of emotions, love, hate, jealousy, all that. People feel the same thing thousands of years ago.
Good point. There is nothing new. Betrayal, greed, trust, love, those are the eternal things.
I love the work of Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes was one of many people that I idolize, but he's definitely a person who I love his work. I love his work, The Tales of Simple, The Best of Simple.
Yeah, the simple tales.
I mean, the way Simple is like, he's like anybody you know in the street. It's like Ordinary Joe. Some people say Ordinary Joe Six-Pack. You know, in other words, just a common person. And even though they call him Jesse B. Simple, some of the things he says and the way in which he says them are really quite witty. Langston Hughes was a very wise writer.
He's a giant.
Really
a giant in American literature. I think
really
he's being found to... Actually, Faith Berry is his biographer, and I know she'd love to come on your show.
I'd love to have her here.
I'll tell her. Because I think that she's uncovering more and more evidence about how he powerfully shaped American poetry and thought. And he's getting... I think he's one of the top three. Whitman, Hughes.
Let me ask you...